Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I sat down with Russ Bullock earlier tonight, and we talked about Mech5 clans, talked about all the details, and he actually dropped us some pretty big bombs as far as what to expect, not to expect from the game. We talked about Mech5 Mercs, how it inspired the clans, and what's different between Mercs and the clans. And he also sort of hinted again at a future of more DLC as well with Mercs. We dove into MechWarrior Online, its current status, and where it's going to be going in 2024. That's sort of at the end of the podcast, so if you want to go a jump, you can go to there. We also talk about what the future plans are, or at least at the moment, what the vision would be like for Piranha Games handling a future PvP title, what that would look like, or how it would be different from MechWarrior Online as well. A lot of positive talk there, so again, if you want to listen to that, I think you'll be happy with the information. Before we dive into the details, I just want to say thank you to everybody that listens. If you guys enjoyed this content on YouTube or anywhere else that you hear it, consider giving it a like, share it with your friends that may be players or fans of the series. And if you guys want to take a step further, I do have a Patreon page. I don't talk about it enough, and I should. And I've got 3 people in particular that are some podcast sponsors I'd like to give a quick shout out to. Chad, thank you again. Downtime, thank you, and Mick Jiggles. I do appreciate you guys becoming podcast sponsors. It really does help out, and all of my other patrons as well. Thank you so much for showing up to my daily streams. And again, I do stream twitch.tv/NGNGTV Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Again, I'll have a link down below to that. If you guys want to help support even further, I do have a store with some new updated merch. I would definitely highly check out the latest designs over there. But anyways, just want to say thank you again. Use the links down below. Let's go dive into this discussion. It's a little bit lengthy, around 2 hours, but I think it's well worth your listen. So without further ado, let's dive in. Again, thank you for doing this podcast, Russ. It's been since January since we last talked. Jokingly, this is actually take 2 because I messed up with audio, but we caught it soon enough, so it shouldn't really impact the conversation that much. Quick shout out to you again. As I mentioned, you sort of dropped a huge tidbit on the last podcast we did, which was, hey, we're working on a new single player game. It's single player and co-op. That got shared everywhere. Every gaming article online did it. So anyways, just want to say thanks again. That was huge. And speaking of PC Gamer, was a recent sort of snafu. What was it like waking up, and when did you find out about the, I guess, leak? That's what we sort of called it, information leak. It seems sort of like you guys were caught off guard. What was that about? What was it like behind the scenes? And yeah, can you just sort of dive into that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my calendar here. I think we'd originally planned to announce MechWarrior 5 clans on Monday, September 18th, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Thursday the 4th. No, maybe it was even Wednesday the 13th, somewhere in there. That it came out. I woke up to it being on the internet. So, yeah. So when did I find out? Yeah, I woke up. I think I woke up possibly kind of early. Kind of one of those things where you're, getting up early. Maybe it's go to the bathroom or something. You definitely want to go back to sleep for at least a couple more hours, but you make the mistake of like picking up your phone.
Yep.
And it was like, I can't remember now if it was someone slacked in the Slack channel or at work or how, but essentially I was like, boom, it's out there. So yeah, it was kind of a panic at first, and not because that things had gone a couple days early. I mean, that was frustrating because Matt and his crew still had a couple days of hard work to go to be ready for Monday. So, they were like, they weren't ready. But my big concern at the moment that I was fretting about was, the company's never had a leak in, almost 24 years, nothing. We've been really good that way. And I thought, oh no, like, is this the first time? I was really disappointed because PC Gamer had shared with us an early version of the PDF of the article. And at first glance, it looked like, oh no, like we leaked this PDF. The company's grown a lot. We're almost 100, I think around 110 people now. And a lot of new people. So you start to wonder, oh no, like did we leak it? So anyhow, after kind of fretting and panicking for the first maybe till about noon that day, it became clear to us that the PDF that had been leaked online was different. It wasn't the one that we got from PC Gamer. It had different art, was in different positions, had different backgrounds that had been worked on. So we're like, breathed a sigh of relief. And then we found out, by afternoon, I think that it wasn't really a leak at all. It was more of a sort of a miscommunication between PC Gamer UK, and Piranha and our PR firm and all the people that people didn't realize that like a couple days earlier than we had expected, subscribers to PC Gamer UK were able to download the PDF version. So it came out on like that Wednesday, Thursday, where we thought we had till like Monday before anything like that happened. So it went a little bit early. So Matt and his team had to I think they spent all day Thursday working their fingers to the bone and getting everything ready enough that we could push it out on Friday, so we didn't have to go through a whole weekend of, watching everyone like throw the PDF all over Reddit and talk about details and things that maybe were wrong or incorrect or just weird. So yeah, so that's how that happened.
Yeah, I woke up to similar. I woke up and I had direct messages sent to me with the Reddit post that had screenshotted every one, and so I was like, "Is this a leak?" Of course, the first thing I'm like, source, and they're like, "It's on Reddit." And then I think it posted the UK, like the front page, of course, with the Timmy and stuff was, PC Gamer and stuff like that. And then there was a few references to a UK. So that's how I found out. And I basically had to what is this true or whatever? And then I just started looking at the slides. I was like, oh, this is very like real. So that's how I found out as well. So pretty jarring it seems like, but it looks like it was no big deal in the long run. Jump started a few days early, but overall, there we have it. So speaking of the clans and the info that was released, you mentioned it in January. Now we know the title, the name, the scope. The question I have is, Smoke Jaguars are pretty, interesting take because of the lore, atrocities, war crime. Like they're almost like the villains in a way. They're, and then on the flip side, we've already got, Mech 2 with Clan Wolf and Jade Falcon, and then you had the Ghost Bears, and then you had the Merc side of things. Why did you guys pick? Was it because of that reason? Because we've already had titles that covered that. Is that why you picked Smoke Jaguar? And then what led up to the sort of decision there? Because I feel like it's an interesting take because of the lore and what happens to the Jaguars. Spoiler alert. Yeah, can you sort of walk me through that decision and all that?
Yeah, there's like a lot of fans of the whole MechWarrior Battletech thing. I mean, you guys know my history with it. I've been since mid '80s when my brother brought home the tabletop and was like, "Here, play this with me." I've been, I can get as nostalgic as anybody about the past. So you saw, MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. You guys have heard this before, but like my whole dream was really make a spiritual successor to not just, both of the past Mercenaries games, but in particular, really MechWarrior 1. MechWarrior 1 was the only one up to that point where you could truly fly around the inner sphere in that total freeform way. And so that was, and then if you look at the cover of MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, it really was a play on Mech 4 Mercs with sort of the red and black cover title. We have a king crab instead of what they had, but it's similar with Mech 5 clans. I mean, you could see the trailer right from the get go of making the sneak peek trailer. It was we knew that we were going to flash that MechWarrior 2 callback at the end. That was just a given. And we knew we were going to have a Mad Cat. It's Timberwolf on the front. That's just no choice. That'll be you can take it to the bank that the final product box art when it ships, it won't be exactly what you've seen in the trailer, but you know what it's going to be. It's going to be like that, something along those lines. So yeah, and then we worked with TNC to get there. So maybe we'll come back to that in a bit. But to your question, yeah, I think I'll just speak from my perspective because other people like Chris Lauer or other people on the team will have maybe a different sort of process of how they got to that point around choosing Smoke Jaguar. But ultimately, of course, it's my decision, and I look at it like this. We're doing the spiritual successor thing, but we also are not the type of company that's just going to, totally copy and recreate something. We want to make our own game too. So we're making a clans game, and it's the first clans game since 1995's MechWarrior 2, right? So we want to do something that's our own. And I'd say at first, it's like, yeah, we've already done Jade Falcon, Ghost Baron, and Clan Wolf. We haven't done Smoke Jaguar yet. We should do Smoke Jaguar. And I gotta say, like, even though maybe when we come to a decision like that, it's put to the test, though, right? Like first it might be just simple logic, but then it has to stand, several months, if not 6 months of scrutiny to sort of work, to establish itself. And I'm really happy, I guess, that we made that decision because I would say it's not so cut and dry. Or I mean, maybe it's not so cut and dry on our game. Like we know the lore, we know the history of Smoke Jaguar, but it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of nuance of politics within Smoke Jaguar, within the ranks of Smoke Jaguar, and perhaps choices that you get to make as a player. It's not just like you're a bad guy. You always do this decision that because ultimately Smoke Jaguar does what it does. Our games that we make at Piranha, we don't try to change lore. Like we ultimately, whenever we've made a game before, whether it was MWO or MechWarrior 5, like no matter what you do, the map is going to reflect lore. I mean, I suppose in community warfare we let players do whatever, but in Mech 5, like the map is going to change the way it does in lore, and same goes here. I mean, ultimately, Smoke Jaguar is going to do what Smoke Jaguar does, but you as a player within your Sibco of star of lance mates, I guess not lance mates, star mates. You've got your own story, and you got your own commanders, and you have your own decisions to make. So there's a lot more complexity there than just like these guys are controversial, they're the bad guys. So I guess I'm just feeling really excited about our decision. I just say that. Like I think it's gonna be great. You guys are gonna love it.
Okay, so
I know you're a big Wolf guy, but like just bear with us. You're gonna love Smoke Jaguar by the end.
It's intriguing. I have a separate question, but it is intriguing because we know what happens. But one of the things that I've been very curious is in those in the leaks, there was more detail and emphasis put on instead of proc gen. Procedural generation tile system that you guys would use the Mercs, which is like every mission is going to be slightly different how it looks and stuff, and it uses this system to be able to create that. And Paul had basically said that it's going to be more focused on story, which to me is really exciting because I've always looked at, I feel like we almost have had a watered down version of like clan culture. Like some people don't realize like it's extremes. You have sort of like political. You have your right and your left, and you've got hardcore like warrior caste system. Smoke Jaguar is one of them. That everybody else below that doesn't matter. And then you've got the other side of things with like Diamond Shark and Nova Cat and stuff that have like older, people in their 60s, which you've never seen in the other. So it's this weird sort of shift in cultures. So for me, I'm interested to see how you guys take on the behind the scenes, because I mean, you're basically talking about like children raised from birth in a warrior society, trained to be basically the best, only the best literally make it. So it's like having Navy SEAL doctrine, SAS, every top stuff from when you're born. Oh, and then same thing with like your aerospace pilots or like your top fighter pilots. It'll be interesting how you guys take that. But before we go any further, I do want to ask, why not Mech 6? I coined it Mech 6 Clans. They're going to come out with it. We got the Stone Rhino and MWO. It was just so like, it was in my, like, I was like, and then it came out and I was like, okay, that was actually surprising. And we don't really have an answer. And you've sort of said here as much on Twitter, but like why and what happened there, or was that the plan all along?
I would say yes, it was the plan all along. Well, a lot of times, there's so much, evolution in these situations where, maybe someday, now's not the time because it would take way too long. But, once the game gets shipped in the future, we could have another podcast and kind of reminisce. But, these things always evolve. Like, for example, MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. I remember when we first started that concept and that idea, Piranha has this sort of habit of maybe initially thinking about an idea as something pretty quick, pretty small, you get something out there. The original vision for Mercenaries was going to be like, I think it spawned off of trying to create PvE for MWO and realizing that the journey there in Crytek was going to be like just brutal. And so I thought, well, let's create, this Mercenaries, experience. And I didn't think, well, let's just cut to the chase. I mean, it was going to be something kind of really, really small at first. And like, eventually it grew into like several years longer of development time than I'd planned, like 2 to 3 years longer, probably $20 million more than I initially thought we'd spend making it, until we shipped this full-blown MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, which I'm super proud of. Like, and this goes, we'll get to your question, I promise, because I wanted to create this. I mentioned, I think, MechWarrior 1 as being the, spiritual successor in a lot of ways. And so I really wanted to create this sandbox experience, like the most freedom you've ever had, like fly anywhere, take contracts with anyone, have factions with everyone. And like, in the end, we created a situation where there's truly like hundreds of hours of sandbox procedurally generated gameplay, which, has some downsides, but primarily, focusing on the good stuff. Here we are, like 4 years post the initial Epic Game Store release. We have 5 DLCs out, and the game's holding a solid like 83% review on Steam. Like, the game is significantly better than when it first shipped as well, right? Like, it's a lot better. I mean, now it's truly a solid 83% type game. Really happy with that. But MechWarrior 5 Clans. So I'm trying to decide which way so the evolution process. So similarly, I think there was a moment in time where we did consider Clans to possibly be like a DLC for Mercs, maybe it was going to be a really, really fat DLC, like a big DLC. But in exploring that, I think, one, we came to the realization, like, yeah, wow, like the workload it's not just about porting the mechs in, right? You got to port the mechs in. You got to do like MWO did. You got to have a completely different, sound setup, HUD setup, voices. What then? You have to have a totally different AI systems. You don't want, the clan mechs to, like, on and on and on. We thought to ourselves, this is way too big for a DLC. And then I thought, side note, I was also like, it's kind of ridiculous to think of it as a DLC as well. Like, what are we trying to do? Shoot ourselves in the foot? I mean, this is the Clans, right? We haven't had a Clans game since 1995. Like, this absolutely needs to be its own standalone product. So that evolutionary process kind of happened again. And what first was going to be maybe a few $1 million, DLC is now going to be a huge full production, just like, we're talking tens of millions on a whole new game. So maybe that's the way my mind works, because I'm running a business and trying to be, making sort of like good pragmatic decisions. And then sometimes those decisions just turn into like, no, this has to be bigger. And this is another one of those moments. And so that kind of plays into the naming, I suppose, because it once upon a time had some roots in Mercenaries. But also, as you know, like, there's a history there. There was MechWarrior 2, and then there was MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries, and there was MechWarrior 4 and MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries. And, I think even though as we get into this podcast, you'll hear that there is a dramatic difference between Clans and the Mercenaries game. very dramatic. But even still, it is an evolution of the MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries technology base. So I don't think, based on its feature set is similar, even though don't mix the two up. Like, it's still drastically different than Mercenaries, but its feature set when we talk about PvE, co-op, etc., in that vein, it's quite similar to Mercenaries. So it's more of an evolution of the Mercenaries technology, which to me also made it fit in with the MechWarrior 5 naming nomenclature. So like Mech 2 and like Mech 4, we have the two titles within that naming. We just kind of went about it the opposite way. We did the Mercenaries game first, and now we're having our linear story version of MechWarrior 5. So that's kind of where your question started, was like, it's not a sandbox, simulator, procedurally generated simulator. I'll just drop a more of a heavy duty line and then let you follow it up. But MechWarrior 5 Clans, people have never played a MechWarrior game like this before. I mean, if you were to look at the past MechWarrior games and say, which ones have told the best narrative storytelling of all the past MechWarrior games ever, I think your answer would be something like this. If you're talking MechWarrior games, then it's probably MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, which we both know is a procedurally sandbox simulator. It had Rihanna and whatnot, but like, it wasn't heavy duty narration like at all. Like, I mean, it was light, but I mean, if we're honest, that's as heavy as it's ever been. Like, that's it. Now, if you want to expand a little bit, include BattleTech, you say, okay, maybe BattleTech. But we're still talking like more like animated concept artwork primarily, and sometimes the characters in the bay, but they're static. So you could debate which one's more storytelling. But the point I'm making is, MechWarrior has had incredibly minimal narration and storytelling. It's never had narration and storytelling like you're going to get in MechWarrior 5 Clans. And I don't mean to say that it's going to be like twice as much. And we're talking like order of magnitude, man. Like, that is the big evolution of MechWarrior 5 Clans. You've never had narration, cinematic storyline telling like this before in a MechWarrior game. And it's not close. So
that's a lot to drop.
that's the thing I'm most excited about.
So I have a few things. Like, played all I actually haven't played Crescent Hawks. That's the one it was a little bit before my time, but from multiplayer BattleTech on AOL, and then similar, but all the way to recent. But I think there's a few things. Narration, when you say narration, you're saying storytelling. I think like Mech 3 did a really good job of like pre-mission brief, where they had the voiceover, the map, and all the details or whatever. They had that.
All UI wrappers. Wrappers.
Yeah, but I'm saying like it was just a voice and then info on the screen and stuff, which is really usable. That's one thing that I've been critical about with Mercs. I hope we get a little bit more of that. And then Mech Commander, you would have the the little mission. Every campaign was like every 6 missions you'd have the commander come in. Really, really cool. It's like that retro Command and Conquer sort of stuff.
Yeah, I get the live action stuff.
Yeah, live. But we've never, I mean, I think you're right. As far as objectively, if you look at like Mech 2, I mean, there's nothing. I mean,
you're reading text.
Yeah, Mech 3, same. Mech 4, they had a little bit of live action as well. But I mean, the thing with it is you've never, this is one thing I've always wanted to experience, is I want to play like I'm in a novel. I want to be Grace and Death Carlisle. I want to be, Phelan Kell and or this character. And obviously there was sort of a little bit of that in, Mercs. But you couldn't like go up and ask questions. Yeah, BattleTech had that a little bit. They had a narration arc, like you could ask like 6 questions, and then that was pretty much it, And I think that's fair to say, like, unless you're going to be like an RPG and where like you can just go down the line or whatever. Yeah. So
I kind of dismissed the live action stuff. That's true. I remember that now. No, when I say narration, I mean, I definitely don't mean sort of the RPG where you're like all of a sudden you're like have like branching, conversational trees. I mean, like, you know, actual, you know, dozens plus of like major characters with major story arcs with dialogue and, you know, Unreal 5 quality NIS cinematic sequences that tell the story of Smoke Jaguar as they enter the inner sphere. So we're talking about a major telling of Smoke Jaguar. Yeah, I probably already said too much. So yeah,
well, let's break down what you just.
That is the big evolution of clans, no doubt about it.
I don't want to stop you. If you want to keep divulging information, that's fine too. I'm not gonna. So you said a few things there. There is a separation between Mercs and clans, though. Is you're going from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5. Unreal 5, the technology available, the pipelines. I mean, you know, a critique of Mercs, motion capture, character sort of development stuff. You know, obviously could leave some room for improvement, but that technology, I mean, you can do it on your phone with Unreal now, which is crazy, which allows developers, let alone a bigger studio, to be able to do those things as well. So are we going to see technology utilize that, nanite, stuff like that? And I think nanite finally has the it's not just the 3D assets. Now terrain is using nanite as well. I believe that's the latest 3.1 as well.
Yeah, no, I think, see, first with Mercs, I mean, this isn't an excuse, but it's like the evolution of that game was initially, you know, for the first couple of years, there was no plan to have any kind of storytelling at all. We were kind of, that was kind of reactionary, and you could tell it was like, okay, we have to, as that game grew and became what it was, we really had to band-aid in, jam in a storyline, and you know, it kind of feels that way. But still, I think pretty amazing job by the team to still, you know, create something even as good as it was, and it's kind of a, as I said before, kind of a indictment on, you know, the franchise as a whole over its long lifespan, that Mercenaries is right up there with about as much storytelling as you ever got in a MechWarrior game. So yes, it's a game changer for clans.
So let me ask.
Some of that's because, sorry, just let me get to your question on nanite or whatever, the various things you were saying. Some of that's because of MechWarrior, or sorry, Unreal 5 for sure. Although, little bit of a history, we were using Unreal 4 for the clans game for quite a long time, and we still had the use of heavy duty, you know, metahuman pipelines and things that we were still on track to do probably 95% of what we're planning to do right now, when it comes to, you know, the characters and the animations and the NISs and the cutscenes and all the storytelling. But recently, one of our senior engineers, you know, did a full port job, and so we upgraded to Unreal 5. Didn't really think we would, but we did, and it has unlocked additional capabilities, of course, as you said, some of these nanite, some of these other technologies. So we're adding those things into the pipeline, and they will make a big difference. But yeah, it's you're right. We're talking full, you know, full face and motion capture animations across all of our characters and everything. So we've invested and set up a studio like within our office space to create all this, and definitely now you're right. I mean, nowadays it used to be you needed, you know, $1 million to set up a AAA animation, you know, company, whatever, to do your video games. Now, you know, we've invested, you know, it's not chump change, but you know, we've put together what we say is pretty close to a AAA sort of animation filming setup for clans within the office now.
Okay.
And I gotta say, like, our team size on. So we didn't. Sorry, I know I'm kind of carrying on.
No, keep going. Roll on.
We really didn't have when we made MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. I would say we really didn't have a character team at Piranha. I mean, I already told you about how that story came about. We were a mech company. We had top-notch artists when it comes to creating, you know, hard surface characters like battle mechs, right? And we were great at that, but we had hardly anyone that could do a human-based character.
Sure.
So, we had to kind of cobble things together, and it worked out pretty well. But it is what it is. This is different. I mean, Piranha employs probably a dozen, 15 people now that are highly skilled, both in full blown human character creation, animation, motion capture, as well as cinematic and creation, just cinematic directors, the whole bit. So I got to say, it's been really exciting because we built up an entire team at Piranha that's very capable of creating human based sequences, which is just a brand new skill set for the company, which is really cool.
Well, I would assume too that you guys went from CryEngine to Unreal. There's a learning curve there, obviously. Now you've continued using it, you're going to get better at it. And then my understanding, and again, I'm just talking on my ass here, but my understanding is 5 is, if you know 4, 5, the crossover of information, transfer of knowledge is, pretty good there. So I would assume that you guys would be more efficient. Does the nanite and stuff like that, how does that help? Or does it help with like performance on PC or the consoles? Because that's also one thing that I keep stressing on my streams, which is what you guys are doing is going to consoles, which I think a lot of people, we're PC gamers, we sort of don't care about all that, but it's got a big impact. Does that help? Those technologies help with like developing, or is it just adds a layer of complexity, just like other stuff?
You're talking specifically about the Unreal 5 editions.
Yeah.
There's some things there that are really, really powerful. I think nanite in particular. I'm not sure you've heard about nanite, and I'm no pro on it either, but upgrading to Unreal 5 allowed us to do nanite. Well, mostly. And what I mean by that is we couldn't use, and I guess this can be the big announcement for your podcast, which isn't being a PC, podcast. Maybe it's not the hugest announcement for you and your fan base, but nanite was still not possible to use if we were going to support the old consoles like Xbox One and PlayStation 4. We were supporting those consoles up until very recent. I think it was last week I made the decision to cut the old consoles out. For a few reasons. I was watching sales figures. I think when we initially shipped Mercs, about half of our total console sales came on the old consoles still. But that makes sense. The new consoles were very hard to find then. And as things have progressed onwards, it's dropped down to maybe only about 20-25% of our console sales. And, we've still got a while to go to release. We're not releasing until next year. So that could be down to 5 or 10% by then. And to me, that's not a reason to pull down the min specs, hold back on some other things that could make the game better. So nanite, now that we're on the next gen consoles and PC, we're using it. And so, you need to talk to tech artists, but the big thing for us was if you're using nanite, you don't have to create level of details for your models. So, because it's just it's an amazing tool that essentially in runtime just perfectly reduces, poly counts and everything, so like before you'd make like 5, if you're this far away, it's this one, you just kind of jump between the models. So it's a lot more efficient because you probably get almost, I'm not sure if it's infinite or how many different level of details it produces, but it could be more efficient for frame rates, but more importantly, you're cutting out maybe hundreds of man hours of art time to create level of details to support those old consoles. So, that'll help. I mean, the more just removing the old consoles is probably freed up some unknown amount of man months when it comes to optimizing for those consoles. All these things that now every last one of those man months just goes into making the game better. So I think it was a no-brainer by the time I finally made the decision. It's never an easy call and things like that. You don't want to leave all your money on the table, but I don't think we are. I think things have finally progressed enough on those new consoles that we could make the decision. Because I could tell you, a couple years ago, it felt like these old consoles were never going to go away because there was just so many of them, and it was still the adoption rate, it seemed like, was so slow. But now it's really picked up, and I think we're quickly over the next 12 months moving towards almost complete degradation of the old systems. So yeah, that was it's going to be good. That just a new technology there that is really impressive.
That's I mean, I'm okay with that, but also just from the I've talked to some other developers and out there, the memory issues on the older consoles specifically, you're very limited. Like I was like, hold on, what? It's really, and that does affect.
Talking like 3 gigs on the PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
That's you get used to. And let's face it, MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries does not run that great on the old consoles. Like it just well enough to kind of get by. On the original Xbox One and in particular the original PS4, it's like memory so bad. And in fact, MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, here's just a little nugget to like make all the PC Master Race, like upset. We used to have, I mean, maybe this isn't that big a deal, but like if you go into Instant Action Manager right now, you've got like small, medium, and large, something like that. We used to have one called Extra Large or something like that. We had to cut it because of the old consoles. So you do take hits supporting those old consoles. So I'm happy to report that it's no longer necessary. We were able to cut those.
Okay, so you brought up something earlier that I want to dive back into, specifically story, narrative. You're talking about narration and story. That's a pretty, I mean, obviously there were story elements in Mercs and the DLCs, but there's not a whole lot of interaction there between characters. It's usually very one-sided, Rihanna or Fahad at moment, but that's it. Mm-hmm. Why the departure from that system? Like what? Because I remember jokingly too, like you had just said, I don't know if it was on the podcast. I think it was on the, but you had said like, yeah, we really need to step up our game on storytelling and narration. And then you guys got the Canadian award for like the best Canadian, and it was sort of a chuckle, for that. But why the shift? Because I mean, the Mercs sort of travel to Intersphere, do that sort of thing. I mean, you guys have sold over 1 million units. Seems to be working. You're not done with Mercs DLCs wise. You've sort of said, hey, Dragon's Gambit's not the end. Why the shift? Why do you feel like narration? I'm interested to hear your thoughts because I agree with you, but why?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. One, and this is in no particular order, but when we went to make the Clans game, I think naturally, Clan Smoke Jaguar, you want to tell a story. I mean, you're no longer a mercenary unit. It no longer feels interesting or sufficient to just like fly your drop ship to the next planet and just go to your drop deck and just launch down there and fight some people. Like it wasn't gonna cut it for telling a clan story. Number one. Number two, I think we had our sort of fill of procedural generated systems a bit for now. Like everyone knows, like there's pluses and minuses. Like I love everything we did about Mercenaries. I love the fact that like I played hundreds of hours of Mercenaries in the process of shipping that game, and I continue to be amazed by some of the situation you get into in a city, and you've got mechs in the ground and stuff in the air and stuff in the ground, and by the time the fight's done, the entire city's leveled. And there's like some really amazing sandbox moments that we created there, but there's limitations too. Like you could see that in the main story arc of Mercenaries, but also even in the DLC. Like even though we're quite happy with, say, the Dragon's Gambit, and Rise of Rozalog, and Kestrel Lancers, you're still, even those sort of linear story missions that are created for those DLCs, you can still see the fingerprints of the procedural system all over them. The tile-based system in the garrisons and the buildings in the cities. So there's a lot of limitations. And so we felt like we have a sandbox simulator game. It's called MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. So that's been kind of the Piranha attitude all along. And this part you'll know very well. Maybe not loved hearing it, but it's like we have a PvP game called MechWarrior Online. We have a PvE sandbox simulator game, co-op game. It's called MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. Now we're making a game called MechWarrior 5 Clans. It's also PvE co-op, but it's not a sandbox simulator. We have that on Mercs. This is a linear, bespoke campaign game. We're going to tell a deep, rich story, deeper than any MechWarrior game has ever attempted to tell before, about the clan Smoke Jaguar invading the Inner Sphere. So that's where the logic kind of comes down, trying to create different experiences, whether you can call them market gaps or just, it's a catalog of products for Piranha Games that's kind of fulfilling a different itch. And then I'll kind of add on to that and say, well, if we want to reach outside of the core MechWarrior community for a minute and say, we're always trying to say, kind of recapture, mass markets, let's say. We've taken a couple different stabs at that, whether it was MechWarrior Online or Mercs. And I could argue another possibility of why MechWarrior remains somewhat niche, maybe even more than somewhat, let's just say niche, is because we're sitting in one of the richest, deepest sci-fi universes ever created, and we've never told the story. Like, no game has ever told the story still. So I think possibly a way to crack that barrier down is to tell a story. And we're not talking about, we're not going to be put up on the same stage as, The Last of Us 2 and say, which one's better, storytelling. I'm not saying we're approaching that level, but the beautiful thing about technology, as you mentioned, how far that technology's come, is if you want to achieve cutscenes that are even 80% as good as some of those top games, that's reachable and achievable, by a studio even like us now, with the way where technology has gone. So when you look at the animations setup we have, and the motion capture setup, so we're really gonna tell a high quality storyline with AAA. Our storyline pipeline will be very close to a AAA sort of presentation, and I think it's going to be interesting for not only super fans of MechWarrior to finally get a cinematic experience like that. I think they'll be very rewarding for them, but I'm also very curious to see if it goes broader, because now we're kind of showing everyone, look, we said we had a super rich universe, or they've never even heard of MechWarrior before, but when they see some of the trailers and cutscenes and things that we'll be putting out as before we ship, it's going to come across as a totally different game, right? You think about Mercenaries or MWO, every trailer we ever cut for either of those games was really just a mech fight, right? And for the first time ever, we're going to have the option of having entire trailers that don't even show a mech fight. They just show human characters aboard, orbital warships having a conversation. So that's cool. That's going to be whoa, what is this game? What is this? This is MechWarrior? It's going to blow minds. So
I feel like that's the untold aspect of BattleTech games in general, which is every single one of us has read, all the novels, or a lot of us have, and I've always wanted that, and I feel like none of the MechWarrior games have delivered on that. I mean, just because of that, I want to be the main character. I want to be a part of this universe where, like you said, it's not like you just drop down on the planet and rinse and repeat. It's like, hey, you'd be in your lounge, you'd be mission brief. I mean, all the stuff, just that you feel like you're connected to this bigger, thing going forward. And I feel like that's exciting to hear, because
Well, and I guess I should mention also that, of course, no matter how good the storytelling is, ultimately you're going to end up in a mech on the ground fighting mechs, and so it's a mech. It's a MechWarrior. Sure. So even that, though, will be dramatically different, because I mentioned earlier, even when Mercenaries tries to be a sort of a linear story campaign, like say Dragon's Gambit or something, we don't have very many storytelling methods in the front end. We have more than we use in the DLCs, but that's just because the DLCs don't have the same kind of budget that Mercenaries had, where we can do the full hollow table type stuff that we did even in the main game. So you're pretty much limited to, there's dialogue in the missions, there's interesting UI wrappers and things, but even when you get into the missions themselves, they do kind of maintain that hallmark of the procedural bones of the game. So MechWarrior 5 Clans has, none of that, right? It's 100% custom, bespoke level design. Every last mission in the whole game. And we're still talking about a significant amount of playtime. I'll take a guess. I think there's going to be at least 40 missions plus another couple dozen side missions. And these are all 100% bespoke, custom created missions. You've seen some of the screenshots or something, like every last mission is created custom by a level designer, and then every last level is arted up customly by level artists, world artists. So the multiple passes on lighting and art for each level. So everything is custom. So not just visually, but that means that it's not like before where we had like this base garrison city kind of system in the generation system. This can be anything we want. So like if you have to go and breach the walls of a facility and then use ECM to jam something, or destroy the aerospace fighters before they take off, or like it's all there for us now. We can do anything we want. There's not any limitations by the procedural generation system. So that means that the mech combat itself, I think, will be at least an incremental improvement. But we already do mech combat really well. So our combat simulation's always been what's carried us, frankly. Like a lack of story in MWO and MechWarrior 5 Mercs has been carried by this, the great, mech simulation. So the mech simulation, combat simulator will still be there, and you'll definitely see at least another incremental improvement on that. But then you mix that in with levels that just truly feel more like like a high quality like FPS game has custom linear missions that you go through, and that's how clans will be. So it'll be a mix of these custom linear missions mixed with the strong storytelling and NIS sequences. It'll definitely give off I think a much higher sense of overall quality on the game.
Are you gonna?
Because I think Mercenaries. One last point. Sorry, Mercenaries. Again, we're talking about an 83+% game after 4 years. It's a quality game, but it's definitely it's different. It's more of a super fan simulation, I guess I'd say. Whereas Clans definitely has a chance of being broader, I think.
I was gonna say, one of the things I felt that was lacking in Mercs is you never felt you were part of an operation that was going on, like a military operation. And so what I'm hearing from you, I have a question. One thing I noticed, even with the DLCs, is even the hand sort of crafted missions, you were still doing the game modes. Is this sort of diverting from game modes? Because that, like you're talking, and that's what I'm picturing is like, hey, it's no longer just like,
there's really
demolition.
There's really no such thing as mission types anymore.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Okay.
The only caveat might be we're not quite settled yet in how we'll handle instant action manager. Like we know we'll have it, but we won't have a procedural system like Mercs has. So it'll probably be a combination of. Well, I think you'll definitely be able to sort of play any mission from the campaign in the instant action manager. I think that's a given, but we're still thinking of what more we might do there. But yeah, if you look at the instant action manager of MWO, it's really all the mission types that you can select, combined in there. And if you're on a star map, you're picking a mission type. This will be very different. Obviously, each mission you'll go on will have an objective, and it might be like, okay, go here, destroy the orbital cannons, and some of the common BattleTech MechWarrior tropes that you've seen before. But it's not like it doesn't have this sort of sense of being, here's a mission type that the procedural mission generator can use anywhere in any mission that you choose. It's custom built into the mission, right? It's not a generated aspect at all. So that right there just makes it totally different. Yeah.
Gotcha. So obviously instant action is confirmed. That's another thing. So for those that may not know, you mentioned in the article co-op up to 5 people. So that's a little bit different. One thing I felt like was, and maybe this might be a future project, but one thing I felt like that was sort of underused was co-op in the sense of like co-op game modes where your friends can connect, and it's like a horde mode or like kill the zombies, other stuff. Is there have you guys thought about that internally for clans, or obviously they're gonna be able to connect to you and just sort of go, is it basically just what Mercs is as far as they connect to you and you play through with them?
Pretty much. Like I would say that's pretty fair. Like there's definitely not plans to go quasi PvP or whatever with this co-op game mode. You can think of it as pretty much a shoe-in to be PvE in the same vein. Like I think we'll make improvements on our UI on sort of how you invite your friends in and stuff, but ultimately it'll be a peer-to-peer host-centric co-op game mode.
Okay.
To go beyond that, which we've talked about going beyond that, and if there was another MechWarrior game beyond clans, I think that would be a goal for sure. To go beyond that, to go more full client server, matchmaker type thing. But clans will be similar to Mercs in that regard.
Before we go down that road, what are your thoughts?
Sorry.
Replayability. This is one thing I thought. Obviously, you could do different mechs and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on replayability? Is this one of those where like I've played like the Mech Commander campaign hundreds of times and it's linear, but it's like I can do it differently, or I'll know where, hey, there's this cache over here, so I'm gonna go do this, or like what do you feel about replayability in that regard?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say some people might say, Mech Commander was like they played it once and they were done. So you might be a unique case in that regard. I guess I'll start out and just being cautious and saying I don't see how it could possibly have the replayability of Mercs, because Mercs is like insane. I mean, if it's not your cup of tea, then perhaps not. But like, there's other people that have literally played 300-400 hours of Mercenaries, because it's like you can start a new career and do anything you want. You can fly different areas, do different missions, try to complete everything hardcore mode, or like stick with lights until you hit. You can do anything you want. Go look for the hero mechs. And I thought the new mechs we put in Dragon's Gambit, by the way, were awesome. Not just the longbow, but like those custom GL Dragon and stuff. Super cool.
Yeah, I like.
Anyhow, so I don't see how it could be as much replayability. However, I will say that our campaign does have choices in it, and they do make dramatic changes. So that's as far as I'll go, and that's further than I should have gone. But like, you have a choice, and so that'll will create replayability. So you'll have, of course, Instant Action Manager. But as far as playing the campaign, absolutely, I think it's going to be rich enough for sure that especially hardcore MechWarrior Battletech fans are going to want to play this a couple, 3 times minimum.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty good for a linear game nowadays. I'm not sure, most games get multiple playthroughs, but I think we will.
Okay. I had a specific question. The just escaped me just for a moment. You said clan replayability. I don't know. It's sort of. Anyways, all right. So there's a lot to dive into. Is there any more info that, I mean, obviously as 2024 is supposed to be the release, that there'll be more and more info released. You mentioned something earlier that I'm excited for. The TMC guys, you guys are working with them. I remember tweeting out, like, and again, I'm not taking credit for it, but I remember tweeting out like, hey, I know, please use these guys. And I don't know, I'm assuming it had already been in the works or whatever, but huge shout out to the Hired Steel crew, TMC guys. They're the ones who did the trailer sort of for you guys. Is that relationship, are they going to be demonstrating like those are the trailers and like cutscenes? Like, are those the guys working on that throughout the game?
Yeah, we're going to start with the trailer or the teaser. Well, okay. I think initially, like how we got involved with them, I didn't really expect to be. I don't remember the exact timing, Phil, if it was before or after that. But I think initially it was we were like we need a teaser, like we need something to go out this announcement, and we just didn't really have the bandwidth to take it on, and I was like, what about these guys? So yeah, we started working with them, and of course they were keen because this is their passion, and they want to have a break in to the industry. This is just my interpretation. So yeah, I think we created a good relationship there. There's some nice guys, and yeah, the teaser was of course a very collaborative effort because Piranha supplied all the artwork and audio and music, and our guys at the end put the the MechWarrior 2 bump flash stuff onto it, and the logos and the bumpers and stuff. But like they did a great job with following our storyboards and creating that. So that was our first little professional interaction with them, because there's a lot of talented people out there, really talented people in the mod community or whatever. But like, there's a big difference between doing stuff hobby wise and doing something for a professional project. So that was kind of a test in a sense, I guess you'd say, and it went great. So yeah, they are engaged for the full product. So I guess I'll just say this: there's a lot of cinematics in the game, like a lot. Way, way, way more than someone like TMC could ever do. I mean, there are a few guys, right? So, but they do certain things that we don't do. Like they do certain types of cinematics that we don't do right now. Like, so I guess I'll just say this: Piranha is definitely going to be putting together like a large majority of the cinematics, like NISs and stuff. Like we're talking, I don't know what the percentage, but I guess 80% of them or something. But there are a couple of really significant moments in the game, like super cinematics, we'll call them, like some of the most pivotal moments in all of lore, and we tap them on the shoulder to kind of take on, I guess what I'd say is our biggest one. And we're hoping that we'll be able to give them another one if they've got the bandwidth and time. So we've got a couple in mind for them, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I have all the confidence in them. I think they'll do great. So I'm hopeful that I'm not really. We'll see. It's again,
Sure.
like this is a professional project that there's tens of millions of dollars riding. So it's not like we just say, hey guys, here's the keys to the kingdom,
Sure.
go. But yeah, they're heavily involved in doing a major cinematic for the game right now. So it's really exciting for them. I'm glad. I'm happy for them. It's cool.
Yeah. So again, quick shout out, Hired Steel. If you haven't watched it, it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just Google Hired Steel. They're awesome. I remember the question now. Mods, because you mentioned mods earlier, and I was like, oh, that's what it was. Mercs has got a pretty, I guess, substantial mod community behind it. It's taken a while for that to ramp up. Obviously, early on, some hiccups because anytime there's a patch, it was breaking stuff. But you guys have done a really good job communicating ahead of time, getting them information. So, are you guys going to do the same with clans? Can they expect that? Obviously, that was sort of touted as a big feature when Mercs was announced. I remember Alex Garden talking about it and so forth.
Yeah, no, it is our plan, and I would say we're just a little more quiet about it, not because we don't want to do it. We want to do it, but I think with Mercs, if I'm not mistaken, we shipped Mercs in like December of 2019, and like I don't know, within 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we did the mod stuff on the Epic Game Store or something like that. So, just to be clear, best case scenario is similar. As much as I'd love to ship it day one with the game, there's just no chance. Like it's we're all hands on deck to get this game shipped on time. So as much as we'd love to have it out day and date with the game, it's not. It'll be a follow up feature. And I hate to guess because I don't want to disappoint people, but like we pretty much understand how to do the mod pipeline now. So I don't think it's going to take overly long, but I'd hate to be overly optimistic too. So Will it take 3 months? Will it take 6? I don't know, but I'd be surprised if it took more than 6. So just kind of take that, but don't take it to the bank. But we really hope to support mods. I mean, that's our plan for sure. I think it's been good to us on Mercs. Like, it's been freeing, you know. Like, I think for a long time there was just really like ill-perceived notion. Like, truly, we've been over this like 10 times together, but like that Piranha was like shutting down mods and stuff on MWO Mercs. And again, we never shut down any mods ever. But just being like, here, mod it, go to town, has been awesome. It's been really freeing feeling. It's like we have zero hang-ups, do whatever you want. I mean, people are modding clan mechs into Mercs, and some people are like, oh, is this a bad thing? It's like, no, not at all. It's great. You know, let them put them in MechWarrior 5 Mercs. It does not change a thing as to what we're doing. I mean, I think it's cool. Put them in Mercs and, you know, mod all that stuff in, but like, you know, we're creating something that, you know, can't be modded into the Mercenaries. So anyhow, long answer to your question, but yeah, for sure.
Okay. That's the clans. I'm sure there's more out there and more questions, but as we get closer, maybe we do this again. More information's out there. There was a lot in that video that I broke down on all the stuff. You guys have released the info at, you know, MechWarrior 5 clans as well. There's, you know, that stuff. Is there any, before we move on from clans, you know, you've sort of set the bar there, narration. I'm pretty stoked about that because that's something I've wanted in a game that, you know, linear missions. I have a theory already because Huntress was mentioned. And so my theory, and I saw the Timmy, my theory is your training tutorial stuff will be on Huntress as part of the Sibco, getting your trial position. For those that don't know what any of that even basically means, is basically you're becoming a warrior in the clan, and then, you know, you can go from there, and then, you know, obviously ship to the front lines and the invasion and all that. So you don't have to confirm. You can just nod if you want or anything like that. But
no, it sounds fun. For sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, naturally our minds go there. I mean,
I'm excited.
You know,
I'm excited.
This isn't, we're not inventing the lore. The lore's written. So,
sure.
Yeah.
We're going to transition to MechWarrior Online. We've seen something that I forecast to be from clans, which is the Stone Rhino. You guys have had a relationship where, you know, Crusader and, you know, Hatchaman and stuff crossover. MechWarrior Online, near and dear in my heart. PvP. I want to just get straight to it. I think it was a few months ago. You know, I asked on Twitter, and you'd made a comment around the fact of, you said, if you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have said no, but maybe ask me in a few more months and something might change. That got us thinking. Obviously, we'll get into, like, EG7 had a report as well. They public company, and we'll get into that. But you guys sort of have a schedule for every 3 years, and, you know, Microsoft, and you guys, you know, extension as far as the license and stuff. There's a lot to dive in there. But PvP, I feel like on a personal level, this is, I sort of realize this is, as a PvP like player, I've sort of felt like we're left in the dark a little bit as far as like moving forward, like a new engine and a new game, you know, and stuff like that. I think that's where, you know, we've had Mercs, clans is, you know, like, is there anything to like bite into there from that statement on Twitter? What are your thoughts on a future PvP?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, let's start with the Twitter comment. I'm trying to remember. I probably won't even remember specifically what I was feeling that day, but I think it goes something like this. Yeah, MechWarrior Online, of course, has been around for 10 years, and it's great. You know, in some ways, I would say, well, not some ways, I think it's pretty clear that PvP is just very, very sticky content, right? Like, even with MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, like, MechWarrior 5 Mercs has a higher player count at any given moment. I think that's true for sure. But, you know, spiky, of course. Like, they come, they play the new DLCs and everything, and then when they're done playing the DLCs, a lot of them go back to Mercenaries. So, I think we've said this before, and I'll say it again. This is not meant as some sort of, like, I don't know, threat or something, but, like, most larger companies wouldn't have kept MechWarrior Online running as long as we have. I mean, we managed to keep it in the black, so to speak, but its its margin is very low at this point. But we love it because it's, well, I mean, not only do we have a huge attachment to it, it's like, our first MechWarrior game, our first self-published titles we broke out of 11 years of co-production and everything. So it's super important to us, and it serves an amazing purpose even to this day of being this, community landing spot for all the MechWarrior players that come and buy Mech5 Mercs and play the DLCs, and they always have a place to go back into MWO. So I think that's fabulous. But of course, we've known for years and years and years now that there's just really no pathway to upgrading MWO. Like, it is what it is. It needs a completely new. If you were going to try to upgrade it to Unreal, it'd be like a total recreation within Unreal or something, which would take many millions of dollars. So it doesn't really make any sense either. And I know you've said this plenty of times as well. Multiplayer, not just free to play multiplayer, but just PvP game design has come light years since MWO first released. So if there was a new PvP product, it would be drastically different design wise from the basic 12v12 match based system that we have in MWO. So that's where we sit with MWO. As far as the the Twitter comment, I think at that point I absolutely knew, of course, that Clans was not going to be a PvP game. I think I made that clear. It's like, no.
Yeah, you did.
What we're working on is, it's, PvE, etc. It's not PvP. But I think the reason I said that was and this is an if, like, I think if Piranha Games gets the opportunity to make another MechWarrior game beyond Clans, I do think that it would contain a full PvP mode, and I think and again I'm saying think because we're talking about the deep future here. This is right now we're like neck deep creating Clans. Like there's no other game in development. There's only thoughts and dreams and ideas, and I think that idea for the future would be something that contains both. That is full featured, that has full single player PvE and a full featured co-op PvP game mode. So, just by way of example, let's say like, you've got your Call of Duty game and then you've got DMZ, the full featured multiplayer game mode. So I think that would be the goal, and try to follow, modern PvP game designs to a degree. Still has to be, MechWarrior at its core, purely a MechWarrior experience. But again, those PvP game designs have come so far. And I would be surprised. I'd be shocked actually if any future PvP game would be like a full free to play game. I wouldn't expect that. I think the market has shifted. I think the Western market, anyhow, in North America, in other Western countries, experimented with free to play around the time that MechWarrior Online came out. But it might work in Asia and other parts of the world. But I think Western countries have pretty much spoke at this point that it's not a model that really works here. So I would expect that it wouldn't be free to play. This again, you're just asking me to prognosticate. So I think that's why I felt like, what, maybe there is a future for PvP, because I now can at least see, a theoretical pathway, a theoretical product. But yeah, it's so to the EG7 presentation. Yeah, and they're a publicly traded company, and it was kind of interesting because it's primarily think of it as more of a sort of a franchise plan for the group, right? So the group EG7 owns some really interesting franchises. There's There's H1Z1 from Daybreak. There's of course EverQuest, and there's a relationship as per the slides between EG7 and Cold Iron, the makers of the Alien Fireteam game. So there's basically a franchise plan forming in the mind of the CEO of EG7, and it's really cool to see that Piranha, is playing a role in that plan. We have a home. It's like they see us as, having sort of this franchise plan for MechWarrior. But for now, that's really what it is. It's just sort of we see Piranha possibly having this franchise plan for MechWarrior, but of course we understand that it's gonna take conversations with Microsoft and things like that. So that's kind of where it sits for now. It probably came across as much more locked in, or I'm not sure if it did to you or not, but it was. Yeah, I mean, it'd be really cool to have another game for 2027, like I think the slide said. That'd be great. But right now, that is not a product that's in development, I guess. Right? There's still we got to get this game out, and who knows what will happen here in the next 6 months, and we'll see if we do get started on another one. That'd be amazing. But
so with
you
that
won't find out until ages from now.
I was gonna say, so is it fair to assume you are in talks with Microsoft about getting an extension by that comment?
Yeah, we're always talking to them. I would say that we have an excellent relationship with Microsoft right now. They're great. They have great guys over there. They treat us really, really well. That relationship, I think, has really, really improved over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Just getting better and better. And so, yeah, we're always talking to them. And it took a conversation with Microsoft to get this standalone Clans game, and they supported us on that. So they've really said yes to us every step of the way when it came to what we've asked for. I think anything beyond MechWarrior 5 Clans is definitely a much bigger ask because it's going into a whole new sort of echelon of products and maybe next gen MechWarrior, and so. Yeah, but they've been great. We are always having conversations with them, and yeah, of course, we're talking to them about everything, whether our next DLCs to, hey, what's next for MechWarrior. We're talking to them about everything.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned, and it's interesting because you followed up sort of. You basically said your vision would be releasing, let's just say, Mech 6, and it would be whatever, but then on the side you'd have a multiplayer aspect. You mentioned earlier like dedicated servers, and it's interesting because like I thought about the complications when I think you're right as far as the market, like all the free to play games now it's all cosmetic, and you've made it very clear that like that's very difficult to do with MechWarrior.
Massive scales. Even
Yeah.
Fortnite only makes the money it makes because of the absolute scale of what the game was.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually monetize that well overall compared to like an Asian free-to-play game or something.
Yeah.
They just have like hundreds of millions of players, so they can make it work.
So it got me thinking, because the more and more I thought, I was like, okay, it'd shift. I mean, you've sort of seen that model with a season pass, like a subscription, basically. That's sort of what this system is. But like I was saying this I think last week on my stream, I was like, what if they just, I was talking about Mercs. I was like, what if they just release or give the ability to have like dedicated servers, and then you let the community do whatever they want, or or why not release a product? And so if someone wants PvP, they would have to buy that product, which still is a win-win because you sell, X game to be able to get access, which is reminiscent of the older sort of style. I don't know what that's called, like buy $50 and it's yours, and then you have access, and then you could have.
I call it premium product model.
Okay.
So MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries is a premium model, so is Clans. It's purely, buy the game and then, buy the DLC if you want. So I guess the only thing I'd change about what you said was I wouldn't think of it as like a PvP game like on the side. It's more like, I don't know. I hate giving examples because people start to think, well, that's what you're going to be, and don't take that as being the case. But like, my understanding is like you can play, Destiny 2, and you can play Destiny 2 as like single player co-op, but there's like a PvP mode. Or I think the modern approach to a game would just be, and this is a big game, like meaning, and obviously there's a reason that we did what we did with our products. And they're still big games by a sort of developer our size perspective when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars. But you're talking about, 50, 60, who knows? Like it's a lot of money to create a high quality game that has a full featured single player aspect with possibly co-op included, but also having like a full featured, PvP aspect to that game. I won't say side mode or like on the side. I'll use the term, PvP aspect to it. So it's like it's every bit as much of an aspect of the main game. There's like single player and the storyline, the co-op and the PvP, and it's just all one big, experience. So that would be awesome. That would be amazing. It's MechWarrior is great. I've been working on MechWarrior games a lot longer than I thought I was going to work on MechWarrior games. So, if we get the opportunity to do more, I think that'd be amazing.
It's interesting too. Not to go down a negative path, but recently the news of like HBS has laid off a lot of staff, and it struck me the parallels between HBS had a solid product, comes out, does really well. Paradox comes in, acquires the company. You guys have MechWarrior Online success. I mean, and I think MechWarrior Online success is bigger too, because it'll let you the freedom to be able to create that Mech5. Mech5 comes out, you have the numbers that you do, success. Here comes EG7, they acquire you. One company went away from the IP, and they're let off, I think, 80% of staff. They don't really know I just feel like it's one of those things where you don't have to comment on that. It's unfortunate, but I was making the parallel of like moving away from the IP, and you guys have sort of been the torchbearers of MechWarrior.
Leaned into it more, yeah.
And you've got clans. You're sitting here saying, hey, it's not out of the possibility of us getting an extension. We're still in the talks of, and I feel like that's one unique thing about this community and like IP is like it's got a pretty dedicated base. I forgot the term EG7 the guy used, but basically he was like, you've got some hardcore fans. That's basically what he said. He's like, the margins are good, sales are good, the hardcore fans are moving that forward. And
yeah, I don't really know almost nothing about the HBS situation. I think, or so I shouldn't say, HBS. I think the major staff layoff happened several months back.
July, yeah. It's just.
I can't remember when that happened because we were seeing some applications and stuff, and I was like, oh shit. So there hasn't been any news yet. After, there was the news that Paradox was writing down the game, but they still maintained that 20% staff, right, on HBS over there?
Yeah, I don't know, other than I think Lamplighters. My point to all that, bring that up was they brought up in a post, it was anonymous, that basically said like there was a passion internally to do like Battletech 2.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is they also said, well, then you've got Microsoft's cut. No one really knows. Yeah. Obviously, you're not going to share that. Steam also has 30%. So if you're a developer, those, and you're predominantly on Steam like they are, because they don't have a client. Like I still use the original client. I don't, but let's just say it's 10% for Microsoft. That's 40% of your just gone, just off top.
No, I get it. I think Paradox just didn't, want to have original IPs. And I don't know a lot about Paradox, but I know that they had quite a bit of success as a company. The way they grew to the size they were was through a lot of original sort of like, I don't know, RTS and like turn-based style games. And so I think they felt like they could just continue to create new IPs. And they went for it. They have some great storytellers there when they did that. Like obviously Jordan Wiseman, he hasn't been there for a while, but him and Mitch and stuff. So there's some strength there at creating IPs for sure. So they went for it, but creating IPs is hard, very hard. So I think EG7 just has a bit of a different strategy. I think from our perspective, and you need to talk to G, the CEO of the group, to get his perspective, but we've got kind of a mix, right? Thankfully, we own some really strong IPs with EverQuest and then some of the brands like that. But then some of the others are really strong licensed IPs, and your cut isn't as big, but established IP has a lot of value. It's really, really hard to go out there and create your own IP. So, every developer dreams of creating their own IPs. We've had those moments as well, but happy to be working in this brand.
Okay. And again, didn't want to bring up too much of Debbie Downer. That was something that recently came out, so I just figured
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, one stayed with BattleTech, one moved on. And speaking of I guess this is a side sort of, as a CEO, president of a company. I know you talked in the past about Epic Game Store, and I remember you reflecting. You said at the time we needed to do it. I think it was the right decision. If you don't need the money, don't do it. How is that, I guess, from your side with Steam? And because I mean, or the Epic Game Store was sort of, when they launched, it was like, you can be an alternative. See, we take less money than Steam, and then people were taking sides, and I'm like, hey, the competition's good on both sides, but Steam that's the market, where they are. Is that difficult to, from a business standpoint, having potentially 40% or whatever, or is it one of those that's like, well, 60% is better than 0%, is that sort of what you just have to do? I've never asked you that, so I just figured
No, it's difficult. I think it's difficult for sure, having someone take, a huge percentage. No doubt about it. But it comes down to volume of units that you can sell, right? Like Steam is still drastically bigger. Some games, it's probably different for every game, but like some games that go on both platforms or all the platforms, they might still sell 80+% of all their PC units on Steam. So it's the reach. And so I think it is unfortunate in a sense. Like I really respected what Epic was doing, like trying to push down the percentage. And I wish they'd been more successful in influencing Steam, but they really weren't. There's a reduction in royalty on Steam if you hit particular big targets, like if you sell like 20, 30 million. I can't remember numbers. So indie games will never see that. We might see some longer term, but it's small reductions. So it's too bad. I wish there would have been stronger downward pressure from Epic onto like Steam and stuff, so we could have seen something a lot smaller than 30%. But in the end, it is what it is. I don't think it's right. I guess I'll just talk from a developer's perspective. I think 30% is way too high. I think their profit margins are like astronomical, and I think they could absolutely afford to be giving us developers better rates than they are. But it's a monopoly. What can I say?
Gotcha.
They charge what they charge. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's this game, of course, we already said this, I think, in the article, or we probably did. One of my bigger regrets on Mercs was just the fact that we were such a scattershot release. I mean, there was Epic Game Store for like almost 18 months, and then there was Steam and Xbox, and then several months after that we were PlayStation. It was just a mess. So like we've spent the last 3 years, 2.5 years since then stabilizing that with all these simultaneously shipped DLCs and kind of building up the marketplaces on PlayStation and Xbox and Steam and everything. So I'm really hoping that the market's in a really good spot and they're prepared for clans in a way that they weren't prepared for Mercenaries, and that we're definitely, the plan is to sim ship everywhere all at once.
Okay. Side tangent from here, but Phil Spencer, I don't know much about him, but he's mentioned MechAssault a few times. It's blown up on Twitter. People ping me. Obviously part of Microsoft. He's mentioned MechAssault. Obviously, you guys, Mercs is on console. Clans is going to be on console. Mm-hmm. I just feel like MechAssault brought in have you guys have you ever just thought about maybe we should do something like that, or do a MechAssault or a different type of arcade sort of shooter? Because I remember I used to not like MechAssault because I was elitist or whatever, but I've realized it shipped with the consoles, and it brought a lot of people to BattleTech that maybe never would have got into it. And I know, I just figured I'd just ask you as a side tangent.
It's interesting. I'll give you my perspective on that. And I do have one. So as far as Phil Spencer goes, he's multiple levels above my pay grade. So I've never met the man or talked to him. But it is cool that he's, I think it was a couple of years ago he said something pretty much the same, right? So I view that as good. I view that as positive. I think that puts us in a good position to just, in general, have MechWarrior conversations with Microsoft. When he kind of said it, he kind of said MechWarrior or MechAssault, MechWarrior, almost kind of combining them. So I wasn't really sure. So I don't know exactly what he meant, but again, I'll just say that, like, yeah, there's really, really good, clear communication lines with Microsoft right now. So I think that's great. So they're thinking about it, it sounds like, and we're making MechWarrior games and we're talking to them. And to your question, I'll give you a little perspective on MechAssault. They were, so I don't know the exact sales figures, but they were pretty decent sellers from Microsoft back in the day. But the industry has changed so much in those 20 years that, like, I'm just going to give you by way of example, and these numbers might not be accurate, but let's say MechAssault sold, I don't know, a couple million units each. Pretty good successes for back in 2002, 2003 when Xbox was just getting going. Nowadays, of course, again, this is just Russ's opinion. MechWarrior isn't going to, or Microsoft isn't going to make a MechAssault game thinking they're going to sell a couple, 2 or 3 million units, right? I mean, Microsoft isn't going to do something unless they think they can sell. I'm not sure what this is just my guess, but let's just say 6, 8, 10 million units, right? It has to be a big game. They only have so much bandwidth. They want to work on big projects. That's how all these big companies are now. They got.
So that's good for you, though, right? And good for studios like you, or smaller, or I mean.
Yeah, it could be. And I'll give you another Russ opinion is that if you go back to when MechAssault was released, and you compare it to, say, the MechWarrior game at the time, which had been around MechWarrior 4-ish, right? Yeah. I think that the differences were drastic, like meaning the MechAssault game was like this drastic sort of arcadey experience compared to that. But I would say, based on technology, based on advancements in control design, and a whole bunch of factors, that line has been blended significantly. I would say it's almost been completely blended. If you take, even though I would say MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries is a pure MechWarrior experience through and through. Like, it's definitely a MechWarrior game. If you pick up that game now, and our new kind of FPS-centric control scheme that we have, and pop yourself into third person and fly around one of the city maps, getting into a fight with your Xbox controller in your hand, your PlayStation 5 controller in your hand, and you're in third person, that experience now is like, if you think back about it and go, oh, interesting, that's like pretty much like 80% of the way of what the MechAssault experience was. So, if I'm talking to Microsoft, I would just be saying, look, I don't think we necessarily need this separation of the two. Unless you want to take MechAssault all the way to Armored Core 6 or something, then okay. I mean,
sure,
that's different. But otherwise, I would say, we've made, I think, really big strides at Piranha to kind of keep the MechWarrior feeling, but to kind of bring that accessibility to that controller and third-person control scheme that almost feels like, you're most of the way there to a MechAssault game. And I think, we'll make a few further strides with clans. Anyhow, so I just think that's an interesting thought that I had one day. People might realize, you go, oh, you know what, he's right. Like, if you actually play it on a controller in that perspective, it's pretty dang close to. So I would say the areas that are left in the game to kind of reduce complexity are around the front end and around the MechLab experience. And I know that might be a triggering thought. People don't want less advanced, MechLabs. At least your listeners don't. Like, they still prefer MWO, complexities to, say, MechWarrior 5s. But I do think we're making progress in researching sort of a basic / advanced scheme. So essentially, doing a much better job of letting people choose between the advanced scheme or the basic scheme. So if you want, have all the complexity of MechLab as much as you want, or click a button on the UI that says you want basic interface, and it's just like, I don't really want to worry about any of it. I want my mech fixed and the way it was, and I want to go back out. So these are just high-level thoughts, but we've made basic, minor strides on that in Mercs. I feel like clans will make some more progress and sort of an advanced basic sort of outlook. But I think that's an area for a lot further research if there was a future MechWarrior game. Because definitely want to ideally cater to hardcore MechWarrior fans, but also, as you say, have I think the controls and the perspective and the camera angles and everything have come quite a ways to being more adaptive to a first-time user, like or just playing. But it's the UI, the menu fatigue that can still, knock out all the casuals, as I guess as you'd say. So casuals can become hardcore, but we need, you need to get them playing, I don't know, some magic number of hours before they become, hooked and become hardcore kind of thing. So I think we can do a much better job. And I don't think it's about having a tutorial as much. Those things help, but like, I think the biggest, we used to always say like it's the torso twisting thing, the tank controls in a first person perspective that's the biggest deterrent for a new player, and I think that was true. I think most of that's been overcome now with the new controller scheme, with the controllers in a third person camera angle. Now I think maybe our number one deterrent would be menu fatigue for a new player. You go into Mercs and go, what is going on here? Like, just like, what is this? It's a lot. So, yeah, these are just ramblings, but
no, it's an interesting conversation because I've sort of taken a look back in time. Mech 2, Mech 3 was just the tabletop, literally the tabletop like build sheet. That's all. So you could do whatever you want. Mech 4, I can see, I remember when it first came out because it changed like the default cannon loadouts, but like I could see actually where they were going because they were like, hey, doesn't make sense like being able to put weapons anywhere, but yet they're supposed to look like this. Or it was like, hey, doesn't make sense to be able to put ammo in your legs. Wouldn't the ammo just be, why not just, like, oh, it's an uptick arrow, it adds ammo. So it's like, what they did is I feel like they got rid of some of the like the tabletop leftovers of like complexity, and then just sort of like that was one thing I felt like it did really good. And then obviously MWO Mercs reintroduced the critical slot system, kept the hardpoint system, but it also, the more and more I played it over the years, I've just realized it's like if you don't know what you're doing, it's like a Tetris game. And if you aren't good at Tetris, then that leads to problems. And so I've sort of said this, like, how do you advance in the design, like core design of like customization? Because that's what it is. Like people will say mech lab. I mean, sure, call it whatever you want, but it's customization. Yeah. How do you customize your mech? And how do you take antiquated systems up to modern age? And then how do you revamp that so it's not as like I mean, Mech 4, like they got rid of like the critical slot system, like Indo and Pharaoh. Those were just, like check boxes. And it's like, yeah, do you need that? Or like, and I've asked, like, what does a MechWarrior game make? I've asked people, and I was like, is that customization? Is that, anyways, it's a, one thing I've realized.
Well, of course, MechWarrior Online has like the most advanced mech lab of
all
time. I mean, it's got
very complex,
like literally everything. And we took some lumps with Mercs because we tried to go simpler. I thought we ended up in a pretty good spot because it was, it was still, you had the hard points. We didn't really, there's no, bloating of hard points like we have in MWO, where there's like, oh, you have 7 here now because we need this variant to be different, and, there's more limitations, but still from a, more of a casual, so to speak, it's still complex. So, and I guess it's less about the complexity, but there's this innate flow issues you get where your mech is damaged, and you can kind of hit just a boop, repair button in Mercs, but that only works most of the time, right? Like if you've got an arm blown off and you don't actually have the Gauss rifle that goes there, you still get situations where you're like, repair all. It says, great, I'm repairing all. When it gets done repairing, you realize you still don't have a Gauss rifle in there, because we've made some strides where it'll automatically buy things from the market, I think, but if there isn't one on the market, you still get into these situations where, people outside of MechWarrior, they're used to playing other games. Those types of situations are just not acceptable. Like a publisher would look at us and say, what? You made a game where you come out and you're damaged and you can't even repair it because you don't have the weapon? Like that's weird. That's one of those MechWarrior weirdities, to other people outside of MechWarrior. So we do the things we can to mitigate those things, but it does feel like MechWarrior is always battling that type of stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, if you know anything about gamers, like people like Tarkov, like
Mm-hmm.
people are okay with the UI system there. I go in a game like that, I'm like, okay, I guess, and so I guess different strokes for different folks and stuff like that. It's just, I know in our last conversation, you talked about the core audience and expanding and the, difficulties there, and just how do you bring
Yeah,
that system up?
I think MechWarrior will always be niche, and I think being niche is fine. We just want to be larger niche. I think the goal isn't necessarily like, wow, man, we're going to make this as accessible as, name your big game, Call of Duty or whatever. No, but I'd like to think there's a future sometime in the near future, even maybe with the Clans release or some other future release that, we capture a bigger niche market, like maybe 2 to 3x where we are now. Because even if we got 2 to 3 times bigger than we are now, we'd be significantly more successful, sales wise, revenue wise, and the profits would be significantly more meaningful, which would create more opportunities for MechWarrior. So it'd be all good, but we would still be, orders of magnitude below, the big dogs, of
Sure.
course. But I'd like to see it grow. Yeah.
Okay, so going back to MechWarrior Online, last time we talked, you basically got straight to the point. You said, hey, the juice has got to be worth the squeeze. The numbers aren't really there. MWO is getting the resources that the market basically shows. You mentioned a little while ago, hey, the lights are still on, that they're not being shut off, but again, just to sort of iterate, from your perspective, is that just going to be is that sort of the status quo moving? Because I've realized too, as it's better just be like, I would rather just know, like, okay, yeah, just FYI, like, this is the status quo. We're moving in 2024. We've been getting maps. We have a map designer. We have a new, I guess, designer, I guess would be Teos is now part of the team now. And he's been diving into some other aspects too, and getting stuff like new weapons, which is shaking some things up. What are your thoughts on MechWarrior Online and as far as like resources and dedication and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, it's status quo for sure. I would say 2023 is, you already know kind of what that's been about, and 2024 I expect will be very much the same. So it is what it is now. It's kind of cool though that we do have some dedicated resources there on the level side and design side, and um, guys, like I said, there's weapons and things, and there's more ideas floating around. I've heard them have some of their meetings, and so it is cool that we are getting some releases with content now. It has been able to benefit from some of the stuff we're doing on the other side, of course, with the release of the Crusader and the Hatchetman and stuff, and yeah, it's quite obvious that you're going to get the longbow. I don't know if Matt's even said that yet, but I mean it's going to happen. So we'll see. I think if there's some more DLC for Mercs, and if we do put chassis in those expansions, and they're probably going to be new chassis, right? Because we already have kind of a match 1-for-1 between the two games. So anything new we do is going to be new for MWO. So I would say steady as she goes, at least as far as I can tell. As long as the player base stays what it is, there's really no way to predict if it will hit some moment in time where it truly drops off. But it's been it's been consistently just what it is now for a number of years. So
Okay, obviously, and I mean, I've had some questions in regards to MWO. The Cauldron was asking stuff like that, but I think most of those have to do with resources allocation to MWO. So, like, I could go into the weeds, but I don't think you're connected directly with that. That's Matt Darren's area.
yeah, no, not really. I get the high level update from Matt. Honestly, once a quarter, but pretty much they're trusted to just run that team. I didn't even know they were putting the new weapons into MWO. until they were out. Like, I've 100% been in, whether it's Mercs and DLC or clans, of course, and, you know, other higher level future dreams and whatnot. So MWO is absolutely Matt and his team run that game, and he's battling for resources with the the Mercs guys and MechWarrior 5 Mercs and clans guys, and figuring out how he can get his chassis in and get his legendary mechs in, and he pretty much has to sort of scrap and fight for art and resources here and there to make things happen, and he's committed to doing that. So yeah, you'll need a podcast with Matt and those guys to really kind of dive into the weeds there if they're willing to dive into it with you. So I don't know what's coming out the rest of the year. Stuff. Yeah. Similar stuff. It's similar cadence. It's Matt's got his plan. It's around the new theme of legends or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. With that, one of the limiting resources that keeps coming up in all the conversation with the Cauldron and PGI is engineer resources, or in this case, the lack thereof. Last July, we got the the new skill tree revamp. It's been great, by the way. We got a few other changes. Is that, I asked this just because of, like, you say it's status quo. Is can the community like make a thread and be like, hey Russ, we really need this? Is the case to be made for Matt and Darren? Like, because there's a few things like Matchmaker and little other things that they need some time on target. Is that still, it's a possibility, or is it like, hey, again, status quo?
Well, I mean, it's a possibility. I think the challenge with engineering resources, I want you to think about it like this when it comes to engineering resources. It's not that, say, we've determined that MWO makes so little revenue that it can never have an engineer on it. But it's more the situation where MWO is so mature now, and on this kind of custom CryEngine tech base, that all the big dogs that once worked upon it, heavy hitters that have now created, MechWarrior 5 Mercs and creating MechWarrior 5 clans, they've moved well beyond. So now you have a situation where it's like, okay, even if we had an engineering resource, everything becomes monumental. Like, I don't remember for sure the workload in the skill tree change, but as I recall, I think we had to actually redirect a couple of our kind of heavy hitters, so to speak, back over there for a time to make that happen. And we did. And maybe the stars aligned. I can't remember for whatever reason. It was between DLCs or something. And we bit the bullet and made that happen. That likely won't happen again. So there needs to be things that are more doable by, I guess you'd say, more junior engineers, or people that are certainly more fresh to the project and don't understand the CryEngine code base like in and out. But also, it's just every request is kind of massive, right? Like, if you say, the matchmaker. So like on the matchmaker, for example, we have an amazing, matchmaker adjustment tool where we can adjust all sorts of things, from like number of heavies to like tonnage and like all this stuff. I forget it all. I used to tweak that in live constantly back in the day. But if it's something that goes beyond that, where you need to get into the code and actually change the matchmaker to some, and if we all agree on what that is, what I'm trying to get at here is, it seems like it feels like it's not a matter of us just saying, here's a full-time engineer, let's put him on MWO. I'm not sure that a single engineer is even enough to move the needle. That's the problem. Like, if it was MechWarrior 5 clans inside of Unreal 5 and we have a single engineer, I feel like that single engineer can actually do a lot, and we can get real stuff done. On the CryEngine stuff on MWO, it's like, give me some more examples, but like, you're not gonna, if you, let's say, hey man, we want to add PvE, well, you got to have like 4 or 5 heavy senior engineers for like a year, right? The type of resources are just never going to happen. So if you think of some smaller things, I don't know if we can think of stuff that's. Am I making sense?
Yep.
It's like it feels like everything in MWO is just so big that it's not a matter of us just saying, kind of like how you have the level design guy, we have a level design guy there, and we have like a designer there now, like just adding like an engineer. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to do anything. But it depends what ideas come out. Maybe there's some ideas that are possible, but it just feels like every change in MWO is just such a undertaking.
Yeah. I
With
mean,
that code base.
I mean, obviously, we don't. There's no mods. There was one mod, Living Legends, was trying to do something in Mercs, and then they did their own thing, and now they're done for. It's not like we have dedicated servers for Mercs or the ability. Like, again, I don't know if that's ever been asked from the community to you guys, because as PvP, I think a lot of players, again, you mentioned it'd be great to do a project in 2027, and I'm, we're all sitting over here like, damn, would that be releasing in 2020? That's a long time to play, MechWarrior Online. And then, that sort of fear of, hey, are we going to have the same numbers next year? What about like stuff like that. So it's not like we can jump ship to, oh, hey, that new PvP mod and Mercs, that's really not possible.
No, I get it. I get it. Yeah, there's really no possibility of adding the full client server aspect to Mercs. I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised that they, it's a massive undertaking. There's a reason why we did what we did as far as, the PvE co-op whole space, peer-to-peer method for Mercs and clans. Adding the full client server and PvP aspect really doubles your budget for the game. So, I feel you. So for now, it's Mercenaries. Sorry, Mercs. What am I saying? MWO. I guess MW Mercs. It kind of gets confusing, but yeah, MWO is it. So, you're getting maps. You got some weapons. I don't know. I'd love to hear what that idea list is. Maybe there's something on there that's like, okay, that's achievable. But is it just sort of like pecking at flies a little bit now? Like, meaning, is it going to make a measurable difference?
Yeah, that's fair.
The matchmakers, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that one because the challenge is the pool size, right? I think we need to be willing to. I play a lot of World Tanks still, as you know, and I've seen them do some things where low tiers now they basically fill those with bots. Because even their North American player base is nothing like the Europe one, right? The Europe server is huge, but North America's server gets down to about 4,000 online in the middle of the night. So you think about that. MWO is maybe, I haven't looked in a while, but I don't know. It's less than that. Maybe we're 600 to 1,000 in the middle of the night or something. I don't really look, but yeah, I'm just saying, even a game like that, it's about, and then the matches over there are brutal, dude. Like it's nothing but runaway wipeouts, one side or the other. You're either on the team that's winning 15-2, or the team that's just getting absolutely farmed 15-2. It's rare to get a competitive match. And they have, you look at their matchmaker pool, they actually show when you click launch, and it shows how many of each type. We show percentages, they show numbers, but maybe there's like 100 people in the matchmaker pool. And they're putting together 15 versus 15 matches, and they're matching tiers too. So it's not a very big pool. And for us, again, it's been a while since I looked. We're doing 12v12, but you might have a situation where the matchmaker doesn't want to make people wait. People don't like waiting. So I've watched it. As soon as it pretty much finds, I haven't watched it in a long time, but finds a combination that meets the rules, that's 12v12, off it goes. It doesn't let everyone sit there and say, well, let's give it another minute to see if a better combination shows up. It wants to get that match kicked off because people are waiting, and they don't like waiting a long time. It's always, so with our player base size now there, I really feel like I'm not so sure there's a way to make it better. Like I think I'd be more, I've been reticent to put resources on that because if I had a belief that like, oh, wow, that's an amazing
Sure.
idea that will absolutely make the matches more competitive, let's do it. I think I'd commit the resources, if it was reasonable. But no one's able to come to me with that. And in fact, I'm like, didn't we basically try that like 6 different times over the 10 years and like wasn't it like the same? Like, yeah, I kind of remember that too. It's like, okay, so what are we doing here? Like, I understand the desire from the community to have resources to keep freshening up the game they love. That's awesome. But I think we definitely need to come up with ideas that are sort of like no brainers. Maybe the skill tree minimization thing to us felt like, okay, this is a no brainer for all these reasons. So we made it happen. I do think we'll also like make it happen if other ideas are brought forward that are truly like, wow, that'll be meaningful. So
Okay.
I guess that's my ending message, that you community can, if Matt and those guys come to me and say, look, the community came up with this idea and we actually think like this one rises to the top. This is meaningful. Yeah, I think you get serious consideration.
All right. It's all right.
Yeah, so MWO stuff. I'm kind of tapped out there. I think as far as meaningful updates I can give you probably.
Okay. I had a question. You guys are going to be launching 2024. Are we going to see another MechCon? Because I never actually got to like just go and hang out, and obviously, selfishly, I'd like to. But a lot of people have been asking, like, you guys always did it big, though. Is that something where you've thought maybe a little bit more low key and a little bit more just chill, relax? I mean, have you thought? Is that crossed your mind? Because it was a pretty cool experience. I think a lot of people, like took the vacation time and traveled and is that
Yeah. Yeah, it's crossed our mind. I would say for the first time since 2018, for various reasons. Obviously, COVID in the middle of that. I think for the first time in like the last 6 years, it kind of feels possible. It's like we're thinking about obviously shipping. We got to ship our game next year, and um, we think about that and marketing and like, yeah. I mean, the notion of MechCon it's come up. I don't know how likely it is, but it was 0% for a while. Now it feels definitely much greater than zero. I don't know if it's above 50 yet. It's hard to give percentages, but yeah, it's popping up in our minds, and I think the biggest reason would be, as you've seen from the EG7 presentation too. Like for a long time there, really wasn't sure what the future of MechWarrior was for us, right? And I still don't know for sure, but like it kind of felt like for a while there, I think I've maybe told you this story before. Maybe I haven't. There's a reason the Heroes of the Inner Sphere DLC for Mercs had so many mechs in it. Like that was a dumb DLC by us because like we literally gave away like every mech we had in one DLC. There was a time when I thought that was it. That was going to be the last DLC. For various reasons, the acquisition of the company, and I just wasn't sure if talking about HBS and I wasn't sure either which way things would go with MechWarrior. But of course, we should have been a little smarter about how we spaced out our mechs and stuff because now we're on DLC. We just shipped DLC 5, and we're making a whole other game called MechWarrior 5 Clans. So, and then of course you saw in the presentation EG7. I think there's at least some desire there to see if we can't establish more of a actual planned franchise cadence. So I think all that knowledge, especially that last bit, really changes everything, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe there could be, a MechCon, but that's as far as the thought's gone so far.
when something like that, I think what's interesting looking at hearing someone from EG7 talk, but also the business side. I think as a fan, it's important to realize like, what's going on behind the scenes. They're very much a numbers people, but like stuff like margin got brought up. The margin, there was a dip for Mercs. I know you guys did a lot of like influencer promotion stuff, and I know that eats into cost. So that my speculation was, yeah, there's the margin, there, but you guys, the margins have been good, and they mentioned as much. So as far as like looking at that, when you is it just more of the confidence of the parent company EG7 wanting to invest, like like, hey, here's X amount, or is it more just the success and maybe the relationship talks with Microsoft, is the positive thoughts you guys are getting, so they're like, yeah, this whole like idea of like, hey, every 3 years, and if they're saying that too, in my mind, I'm going, okay, so a 5-year extension isn't going to cut it in that. I mean, you guys, I mean, and again, you've sort of said if you launch, you need time to recoup your investment. So when is that sort of, am I right in that, as far as like you're getting good feelings from EG7 as far as investment?
I think one thing I'd say there is with premium product releases like Clans and Mercs, generally when a license expires, you don't have to take your products off the market.
Sure.
So it's more of like, get the product shipped. So in that regard, I guess as long as 5-year extension might be long enough, say, to get a game out in 27, etc. So there's that, and then the other thing, yeah, I just think it all adds up. In the end, of course, money and success is the most important thing. So like, I think Mercs did well, but it'd be really great if Clans did better.
Sure.
I think it's got a chance. It's the Clans again. It's got the very recognizable, Mad Cat on the cover. We'll have a very different take on our marketing and trailer approach leading up, because we've got that, characters and human characters, and that's much more broader reaching. So I'd love to see Clans do, a noticeable step in sales. If that happens, then I think things like MechCon just become drastically more likely. So yeah, and then let's continue our conversations with EG7 and with Microsoft and things. That's one thing I've learned, and I think you've learned too, Phil, all the years talking to me. Like, things evolve, things change. So I've been pretty honest with you. Like, there's been multiple moments over the last 5-6 years where I didn't know if we'd make any more MechWarrior products, and then we make more, and we'll make another one, and we've just been over what the future is showing some interesting signs. So yeah, I think things are potentially looking good, but I've learned to just sort of roll with it, and things evolve.
Understood. And yeah, I mean, I've definitely learned a thing or two, I would say over the course of like 10 years, again, especially working with you guys. Yeah, I've wisened up a few times. I've said this a few times. There's been a few times where I crossed the line and put you in a position where it wasn't cool, and yeah, it was just it's a learning process. And for me, being in the industry, I'm a fan, which I'm a hardcore fan. So to me, it's like, yeah, that's my job, but like, the game matters more, like, and so like I've had to struggle, and I've learned that as far as like crossing some lines in the past where it put Darren and me, and again, for those that aren't aware, me and Darren used to do contract work for Piranha Games. Now Darren works for Piranha Games, and it's just one of those things where, yeah, you learn a few things over the course of years. So from a content creator standpoint, creating a podcast, having someone on your stuff like that, you don't want to put them in a spot. So again, I've learned a few things.
I think players in general, let's just say consumers, players, it seems to me anyhow that everyone's learned a lot over the last 10 years. I don't just mean, MechWarrior players, but I think, I go back 10 years ago, and we still get some of this today, but, the type of things of like, oh, you guys are idiots. Why don't you just do this, do that? Because people didn't understand maybe the amount of money and, time. And I feel like that conversation, though, has gotten easier over the years. One, I do think for various reasons, I've become more and more transparent. I think the earlier days of MechWarrior, there was I don't know. Our relationship with Microsoft was a little bit different back then. It felt we were definitely more insular because we were kind of protecting this sort of like license that we had, and like it was just different back then. I've matured a lot since then too, and I think some of the insecurities I may have had are just like were unwarranted. I realize, and maybe we just, of course, the position we're in now compared to then is just a lot more comfortable. We were, kind of back then we were, we needed MWO to ship and make a certain amount of money, or we're going to close the doors. So, we've grown as a company now. There's a lot more security. We're working at a much higher production quality level. I feel I can be much more open book with the community for the most part, and I do think the community and the players and everyone has kind of gotten fairly educated over the last 10 years around game development, just because I think there's a lot more information out there with the Unreal Engine and various things and indie companies and indie projects, and so people understand a little bit more about just making requests that sound easy, like, why don't you just do this? It's like, well, you just said, why don't you spend $10 million?
Yeah.
You realize that, right? So I think collectively the conversation's gotten more comfortable, between all parties.
Well, hey man, we've gone through a lot here. We're going on over 2 hours as well, with a retake there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut you loose. Thank you again. Is there any last, words? Obviously, you've talked a lot about, clans, Mercs, MWO, a little bit, the future. Is there any last tidbits you want to drop?
No, I'll have to do a little summary after I get off this call and send a message on Slack and say, okay, I let the cat out of the bag on this, this, and this. I'm trying to remember what they were, but there's a few little things. No, it's good. I think,
We'll do this again.
Keep loving MechWarrior. Keep playing. Support the products. It's the best thing you can do. And that's it.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, man, I'll reach out again in 2024 and we can do this again.
All right.
Sounds good. Phil. Thank you, Russ. Bye.
Later,
do you like large desk mats? No guts, no galaxy.net.